What is that story from your school? Serious. First day air freshman. After the roll was called, one kid said his name was not called. What is your name? Hal Wirtz. For the next 4 years someone would take a test for Hal. Get photographed as Hal. Join clubs as Hal. No one in the admin noticed it was someone different in each photo. The only time no one stood up for him was at graduation. At a party someone, while very drunk, whipped out his dick and masturbated on someone else's car. It very quickly became the go-to retort whenever he tried giving someone else shit. You just on a car. There was a kid who intentionally took a shit in the middle of the gym for $10, and for some reason everyone called him Parmesan after that. School trip to China. On the day of return, a 16-year-old girl from my grade stole a pair of sunglasses from the airport and got caught by airport security. She stayed behind while everyone went home. Her parents had to fly to China from halfway across the world to bail her out. Made the news. Our biology teacher was everyone's favorite teacher, and so one year everyone decided to prank him by leaving pennies everywhere he would go, and no one would acknowledge it to make him think he was crazy. It started out with people leaving pennies here or there in his classroom, but as time went on it kept getting more and more extreme. Students started leaving cups of pennies on his desk, in his jackets. When he had speeches in the auditorium, people printed pictures of pennies and snuck them into the papers he was reading from. And finally, they print large pictures of pennies and snuck them into his classroom and put them on his walls. Student my freshman year of high school had a mental breakdown. The health teacher failed him. Rumor was he got beat at home for it, and so he took it out on the teacher. He started screaming in the middle of class. Teacher sent him to the hall, and when she opened the door to check on him, he had constructed a homemade blowtorch with hairspray and a lighter to try and catch her in fire. When she opened the door, all you see was flames. He was shortly expelled afterwards, and the teacher took a few months off work. Don't know whatever happened to the kid. Back in the 90s, kid came out to a few friends, and as the old saying goes, those friends told a few of their friends, who told a few of their friends, and so on. Within 2 weeks there was a petition to have him removed from the school, and the other 3 high schools in town had petitions passed around to prevent him from transferring. Instead of doing something about it, most teachers and administrators signed the petition as well and looked away when he was being harassed. He had to walk around with a friend group everywhere, so he wasn't jumped and couldn't even use the toilet. He had to go down the street to the gas station instead. He even almost failed gym because he couldn't be in the locker room with the other boys without a beating. He ended up dropping out midway through his senior year and leaving town. Edit, I should add. The local paper got wind of it and tried to do a story on discrimination and gay rights, but that only escalated the situation, which was the eventual cause of him leaving town. Morning news show crew had their camera accidentally go live and broadcast to the entire school a student sucking a Pop-Tart in a suggestive manner and another flipping off the camera. Folks, if you're in front of a camera, always assume it is on. It's a good story, but unfortunately never gained much popularity. My form tutor had a cane. Was really nice. Everyone liked him. One day he apparently tripped over that cane in the middle of a lesson. He wasn't very hurt, but the school still called his wife to inform her of what happened. It apparently went something like this. Hello, Mrs. ______. We just wanted to inform you that your husband has fallen over at work. Oh gosh, is he okay? Yes, he's fine. He just tripped over his cane. He doesn't have a cane. So yeah, my form tutor had a cane and was faking his disability. After this came out, some students claimed to have seen him actually running in the local park on Saturdays, and many people had noticed that sometimes he wouldn't actually put his cane on the ground. He would just move it back and forth but never actually make contact with the ground. Mormon jock white kids grabbed a Mexican girl's ass. At that time there was a gang called WBP Wetback Power, which was a rather large gang consisted of Mexican Americans or immigrant kids. What started as a huge brawl turned into a campus riot and students were throwing soda cans at teachers and destroying everything they could. Riot squad was called and whole block had to be closed off, shut down. This girl came to school embarrassingly drunk, staggering through the halls until a teacher tracked her down and carried her to the nurse's office. She was one of the conservative, quiet, mousy girls. That day she showed up hair teased to the maximum, skimpy blouse and the shortest skirt I've ever seen at the time. She was the topic of every conversation all day, and it was weeks before she resurfaced again, converting back to her quiet, mousy self. A few years after I graduated, 99, the assistant softball coach got caught having sex with one of the students/softball players. Then it came out that over the years he had had sex with over a dozen of the students/players. Dude was not conventionally attractive at all, and the girls he had sex with were all super popular, super gorgeous. Turned out that the reason none of them came forward until he got caught was they all thought they were the only one, that they were special, and when they found out that they weren't special to him, they were pissed. Many of them were minors when they had sex, so he was charged, served time, and is now a registered S.O. His wife, who is gorgeous, divorced him. Two of his victims, they graduated in 98, were best friends during his crimes, and were still friends when he got caught. Dude got caught bonking his twin sister. Kid brought a gun to my high school and fired it off in a classroom during lunch. We had an open campus, and one of the teachers pulled the fire alarm thinking that would get the kids out faster. Unfortunately, we are supposed to go out to the field if the alarm goes off. That's the meeting spot. Only problem was that it was right underneath the third floor classroom this kid was in. So we all get outside, and teachers are running across the yard yelling at us to keep going to the hospital next door, which is super random. Freeway had to get shut down because it ran right next to the classroom as well. The kid eventually let his 3 hostages go and fired at police in an attempt at police-assisted suicide. He got shot and ended up with brain damage but actually lived. One of our custodians had sex with a teacher. His wife, who was also a custodian, kicked him out of the house. A month later, one of the coaches unexpectedly went into a locker room after hours and discovered he'd been living at the school undetected. He was fired. Phys ed teacher, in late 20s, was discovered to have a relationship with a senior, 18F, who also happened to be the daughter of the high school principal. Phys ed teacher's wife also worked at the school, and when it came out, she threw him out. He still needed his job, so he moves into a camper, which was parked at the school, and stays there the remaining 6 months or so. He then follows her to college, and gets a job in that town. I haven't heard anything in the last couple years, but they were together last I heard. A girl got pregnant and didn't tell anyone. Nobody noticed the whole time she was pregnant, and she finally gave birth in the school bathroom to a stillborn. She hid the body in her locker, and the body was found one day by the janitor, who noticed a weird smell coming from the locker. The poor soul ended up in an institution. Her dad was actually a good friend of my dad, and I remember how devastated he was 4 years after. A tragic story. Oh, I have lots. The most memorable one was the student who set off a ton of cherry bombs in the bottom floor toilets to get the staff to come running to the scene, then setting off tear gas once they got there. No one knew why he did it. I grew up in rural Oklahoma in the backwoods ATS. 2 of my teachers married, barely, former students. The biggest event I can remember in my day was that one of the 8th graders, I was a senior when this happened. It was a K-12 school, started dating a guy who graduated 5 years before I did. So she was 14, and he was 21 to 22. This was extremely common, and the town was so poor that it was encouraged because he was seen as a contributing breadwinner. And all these girls were just going to become wives/mothers when they graduate. Anyway, 90% did. She took him home, and he met her 28-year-old mother, and he dropped the middle schooler like a hot brick. I was privy to all of this because 1. It was a very small town. And 2. My parents owned a local grocery store and everyone told their business there. So fast forward to the Halloween dance. The community was welcome. So there are adults there as well as high school kids. This was a dumb idea for obvious drug and alcohol reasons. Boyfriend shows up at the dance with 8th grader. I'm DJing. My mixtape was a thing of beauty. Whitesnake into Skynet into George Strait. Magic. Mama comes into the gym and grabs 8th grader by the hair, and they roll around on the dance floor gouging, and unwrapping G's, and screaming their love for Itchy you get your goddamn hands off my man. And you don't even know how suck pecker yet. Type smack talk. Principal and coach drag them outside, and half the crowd stays to dance to my Elton John Denver mix and the other half stands in the gym parking lot watching two attractive blondes fight over a man with a concave chest, pube mustache, and a part-time job sweeping and emptying trash at his uncle's laundromat. 84 students were arrested or apprehended for meth in one day. A girl, their dealer, gave cops the information of all of her customers. She kept records and agreed to go to rehab instead of going to prison. The band teacher's son, who was in my sophomore class, was murdered by a hunting rifle in a field while walking home from school. The murder went unsolved for 20 years. They think it was two older boys, but they both killed themselves in the 1990s. Really sad. Especially because the murderer's younger brother was a good friend of the murdered kid. The younger brother was part of a group of friends that visited with the murdered boy's parents every Friday afternoon after he was killed. They did this for years, until they went away to college, etc. A guy got stabbed in the back. The attacker fled. He pulled the knife out of his back himself and then chased after his attacker like the freaking Hulk. There was an illegal arms dealer in my school who was selling knives and tasers to kids. HS girls basketball coach groomed and raped probably over 100 girls during his tenure. He was finally caught when a star potential D1 girl wound up pro. No charges. Just fired and retired. In 2000, a few years after I'd graduated, a local radio station ran an online contest that allowed people to vote for the school that would get a concert from Mandy Moore. Since this was back in the early days of the internet, they had no controls to track or limit voting. Kids from my school, an elite STEM magnet program, wrote a couple of scripts that generated tens of thousands of votes for our school. After seeing that, another school tried to do the same thing, but our bots were better. The station tried to say it would not count script votes and would disqualify anyone found using them. But it seems that the voting was so corrupted that there was no real way to figure what votes were real. We ultimately won the contest by a huge margin, and Mandy Moore came to perform. The real prize was winning the contest in the first place. No one showed up to the actual concert. A guy and his friends went to McDonald's to hang out in the parking lot, and he made what they all called a poop sock and then beat each other with it. Yes, he pooped in a sock. And also I think I should mention they were seniors. A few years after I graduated, a kid took another kid into the woods at lunchtime and strangled him to death with his belt before returning to class. The weird kid in my school put his dead dog in his backpack. Our Ike teacher killed himself after his wife, who was a teaching assistant at our school, cheated on him. His son found him after he'd slit his wrists with a Stanley knife. He was a great teacher. The wife was not greeted well by the students and shortly resigned. Story that did happen back in the 80s. Cop came to my high school to talk to us kids about the dangers of drugs. With him he brought a locked briefcase with what the drugs looked like. A small sample of everything in blister packs. During his second day, while on lunch with the case locked up in his squad car in the trunk, he returned to his squad car to find the trunk of the squad car pried and busted open, and drugs gone. He was supposed to come back for a third and final day, but never did. Couple of the stoners in my high school had a fight due to a dispute about a sale of pot. One of them brought a gun to school and shot the other in the foot. Since one of them was black and the other was white, The geniuses in the Fairfax County school bureaucracy decided that it was a racial issue and sent a bunch of idiots to talk to all of us about how we felt about it and grill us on our outlook on race relations. The fact is, the social divisions in our school were not racial. The larger cliques were the jocks, the stoners, the preppies, and the auto shop kids. None of these cliques were racially exclusive. Catholic high school in the United States. Students ages 13ish to 18ish. The vice principal, who was in charge of student disciple, was also the athletic director and the head football, American style, coach, and had played professional football himself many years earlier. As with many Catholic schools in America, the football team was very good and was a very big deal in the school culture. 3 of the vice principal / athletic director / football coach's children, including his only daughter, were students at the same time I was a student. The star football player for the team knocked up the daughter of the vice principal / athletic director / football coach. The nuns who actually ran the school were none. See what I did there? To happy with the situation. My junior year, a popular girl was running in Penn and suddenly dropped stone dead on the track. 1 second running, next second gone. All kinds of spooky rumors that reading her diary sounded like she knew it would happen sprung up around the event. In 8th grade, my friend and I got hot sauce banged from our school district because we decided to get 2 bottles of habanero sauce and chug them at lunch to prove our manliness, only to both leave school early and my friend go to get his stomach pumped in the hospital, while I spent a week on the couch in pain with my parents informing me how stupid my life choices are. Small town and people tend to be nosy, but leave it alone if it doesn't bother anyone else. Several classmates would go to school in mascot costumes. They'd jerk off in it. Super Senior was got a teacher pregnant. She was married to Anata teacher, but everyone hated him, and he was an abusive asshole. The student and teacher are still together and have like 4 kids. Teacher was so mean to a student she tried to kill herself by jumping off the 3rd story window. She survived, but the teacher was still there. No one liked him. We found out someone was sleeping with the town's #1 MILF. He was a senior, and they started living together when he graduated. Teacher was blackmailed by the students he fucked. He apparently lost his savings in it. Someone tried to drown themselves in the school's pool. Special ed students watched a teacher fuck a student. They didn't know the students would be in the other room and be able to see them. Students got caught fucking in the elevator. Someone kept shitting in the locker rooms. 1 student died in a car crash. Later it turned out she was trying to drive over someone, but lost control and crashed. A lot of people remembered her as a bitch and her family tried to memorialize her in some way, but they kept getting death threats. We had a gym teacher, Mr. Dis. His nickname was Mr. Die. Why? Well, during a class outing to the ski hill, he was teaching students how to stop by using ski poles. During the demonstration, he accidentally ran into the end of the pole really hard, and one of his testicles exploded. Hence, he went from Mr. Dice to Mr. Die, which is also probably what he wanted to do at that exact moment. In junior high, a student was raped and murdered by a family friend or her stepfather or something like that. There's a little memorial still in front of the school. English teacher was taking ass and panty shots of girls. Ended up having a whole folder on his computer of those pics. Never got arrested, but definitely got fired. The sewage system overclogged, so all the bathrooms got flooded with black water that ended up going into the halls. We were off school for 3 days because the faucet water got dirty as well. Someone decided to smoke pot near some sort of vent and an entire wing of the school had to be shut down for it. This is very recent. About maybe 4-5 years ago now. But we had this really awesome English teacher. She was kind-hearted, super accepting, and everyone she taught always said that she was the best teacher they'd ever had. I mean, this woman even had the dropkicks doing better than they did in other classes. A student in one of her classes came out as trans and switched pronouns to he/they. This was the first time many of us, teachers included, had heard of they pronouns, and we didn't entirely understand it, but the majority were relatively accepting. This teacher in question was, of course, accommodating as well. However, unfortunately forgot a couple times and referred to them as a she. Both times, she apologized. But on the second time, the student said that was unforgivable, that she was doing it on purpose, and ended up reporting the teacher. It was absolute chaos. Parents were involved. There were many conversations and the teacher was put on leave for 2 weeks until the situation was sorted. Some of the students' friends went as far as sending hate emails, posting negative things about her across social media, etc. In the end, it was recognized that the teacher had made a genuine error with no intent to offend, and the situation was considered resolved. Except that was it for the teacher. At the end of the school year, she decided this would be her last teaching job, as that was one of the most stressful moments of her teaching career and she didn't want to be put through that again. I don't know where she is now, but she was truly one of the best teachers we'd ever had, and it was devastating to see an instant of student bullying tear her apart like this. When I was in school, we had a learning support teacher that all of the boys had a crush on. She was young, quite glamorous and pretty. She seemed pretty nice, if not a little ditzy. Shortly after I left school, it came out that she had been having a relationship with one of her 14-year-old students. Keeping in mind that, with her being a learning support assistant, this meant that she worked with students who had autism, Asperger's, etc. The boy she had an affair with was autistic, and this affair had gone on for 2 years before she was caught. The reason they were found out is because the boy's parents found her messages on his phone, basically telling him that she was going to kill herself if he didn't stay with her. So of course the parents called the police and an investigation was conducted. And she thought it was a good idea to turn up to her court hearing wearing a sweater that read more issues than Vogue. She was found guilty. First one. Super beloved social studies teacher got caught raping and exchanging messages with a 16-year-old girl. Second one. It was your average day in school, and they randomly called for a lockdown. They didn't announce it was a drill, like usual, so we were all confused. They lifted it like 20 to 30 minutes later, and they said that a dog was on the loose outside. Made no sense. Word got around by 6th period that police were on the ground searching for a bomb. Apparently someone found out that a guy broke into the school the night before and there was footage of him wandering the halls and taking photos. So the school thought it was some psycho plotting something. Turns out the dude just graduated from there and thought it was appropriate to give himself a tour of the school after hours. Lol. I went to a continuation high school, so you would think I have a lot, but I don't. Most kids there just got caught with weed or fell behind in school, some being kicked out for grades for completely stupid reasons, like being stuck in the hospital with a serious illness and being in and out of a coma, thus unable to do her work. But everyone I graduated from there with remembers one particular guy. Let's call him Johnny. Johnny was a partier, like most from the school. There was a big party in the forested park by the creek. I did not attend, since I didn't enjoy parties, but most of my close friends did. The next day, everyone seemed on edge with Johnny, especially a mutual friend of my group's. Let's call him Duke. While we were in math, I was sitting nearby Duke and Johnny. Duke sat directly behind Johnny. I could see Duke was antsy, and he kept standing up and sitting down. This behavior wasn't unusual for a lot of kids in alternative ed, but there was something particularly aggressive about Duke. Suddenly, Duke attacked Johnny from behind and began brutally beating him down until the math teacher dragged them apart. Duke only got suspended, but we never saw Johnny again. Turns out multiple people had watched Johnny grope and rape another student from our school, and was also drunkenly admitting that he consistently molested his young sister, saying she liked it. I'm hoping that wherever Johnny is, he's dead and suffering, or locked away for life. I eventually was updated by the friend I was close to who was best friends with Duke, but only learned for sure that Johnny was sent to trial for both of the rapes. Okay, so this is a weird one. So this was our primary school that I don't go to anymore because I'm too old now obviously, but there was this pedo and he kept touching the girls inappropriately. This was a teacher's husband. The girls told our principal. He did nothing about it. Nothing. Didn't tell the parents. Didn't report him. 15 years later the girls reported both of them. They got in a lot of trouble. Don't know exactly what happened. This happened in a school in Northern Ireland. When I was in 9th grade, the kids started to get bored. I went to an all-boys school where hormones were aging and everyone was an attention seeker. There was an art teacher at my school. Kind. Supportive. Everything a teacher should be. While I wasn't into art, I always tried my best in her classes. I genuinely liked her. This one kid, the cliche rich dad is money kind of kid, thought it would be funny to edit her Wikipedia as she was a relatively well-known sculptor. This was at the time where things didn't need to be approved on Wikipedia, and he edited it to say some pretty shitty stuff, like making fun of her being lesbian, calling her slurs, and just other homophobic/racist things. Everyone saw it, and for a while he got away punishment free. Being the little snitch I was, I bribed someone in my grade to tell the head of our school about it. The kid got called to the office and a lot of other stuff came out about him. Like how he would call black kids the N-word, he was white, and how he brought a knife to school and threatened to stab the autistic kid. What's worse is that he got no punishment because his dad would donate $150K a year to the school and threatened to stop if he got punished. While this might not be that bad, it was one of the biggest scandals at my school. A kid brought a samurai sword to school and pulled it out in the cafeteria to threaten his bully, but also just went but mental and lashed out at a few kids who tried to stop the fight. Ended in severe injuries, but everyone survived the incident. The first day of, I think, my 7th grade year there was a bomb threat. The superintendent made the executive choice to do absolutely nothing and sent us all anyways. Thank God nothing actually happened. A few years down the line the entire elementary school has to evacuate due to another bomb threat. I'm not sure why they took this one so seriously, but they spent most of the day at another school until they realized the threat was meant for another school. Don't ask me how. If I remember correctly there was a shooter threat during finals, which they also did nothing about. But it was right after a major school shooting had happened, so we were all pretty freaked out. Several teachers also slept with students, but that's less interesting. Decades ago a very young male teacher was observed having sex with a current student at a fairly wild weekend party at school. The following Monday he showed up wearing shorts with betadine disinfectant on his carpet burns. From then on he was called Party Knees. He left the school pretty soon afterwards. Just before my very first semester of high school, the beloved principal got randomly removed in what can only be described as a fuck you from the education board. What ensued was a full-on, school-wide protest movement demanding for the principal to be reinstated. Had its own slogans. Cars were driving by with people hanging out the windows with signs. The whole 9 yards. Then, one fateful day, while I was in the middle of lunch, everyone just stood up and started cheering and hollering. I didn't know what the fuck was going on, so I walked over to someone who was straight up crying from happiness and asked her what was going on. Turns out, the news had come out saying that the principal was, indeed, coming back. I didn't have a phone at the time, so I wasn't able to get the news when everyone else did. A few days later, the principal was back and all was good again, until COVID hit. Then my high school experience tanked and never again reached the heights that it did that first semester. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video don't forget to drop a like. If you would like to see more content like this in the future, subscribe and turn on notifications to be notified about future videos. Now check out one of these interesting videos.